Welcome to Fantasy Fast Break. It's the only racquetball fantasy show where you get to be in the seat of the GM. Today we're breaking down the world doubles and singles in Denver, Colorado, the first stop for both tours this season. I'm Brian Pineda here live, joined with my host, Todd Boss, and we're going to give you
we're going to compete each tournament, and then we're going to have a season-long competition. So that's how fantasy racquetball is going to work.
I'm very much looking forward to the 2025-2026 season. There's a lot of fresh blood, Todd. I've seen, like we said, we've covered this for multiple decades, you more so than me, but just in the couple decades I've been watching this, we saw a lull in racquetball where just the top supreme players were just dominating. There's a dominant four there for a while. And then now as it's progressed, now as we've seen racquetball move to an international level, not just so much located in the United States, we're seeing Mexico and Bolivia, even Japan hosting the previous World Championships. We're seeing a lot more of this integral, even European nations coming into play. In fact, I believe we have our first European player in the first stop who's going to be in the main draw for the men. But I think some names to be watching this year, and we've been seeing it since last year. We've got Diego Garcia in there. We've got Cole Sendry who's coming up along with his partner DJ Mendoza coming up. Jhonatan Flores. We've got Miranda, like a lot of fresh blood. Plus now who are the veterans on the men's side of things? Montoya, Mar, Jordi Alonso, Andre Parilla, Cunha. We're seeing these guys, and obviously Jake Bredenbeck and Adam Manilla. We're seeing them hold a very top spot. It makes it harder for those news guys to break in. But and then obviously you've got the supreme powerhouse of Kane Waselenchuk. So I think for the first time in a long time, we're seeing a balance in the 32s. We're seeing a sometimes rough first round for these top 8 players in the 16s. And everything is geared in the quarterfinals. And usually we're just looking at the semis in the final for a while. What do you think?
I think that's a little fair to say, 100%. I think we're seeing the dawn of a new era on tour, both from a player perspective, as you just covered, but also from an event perspective. The last couple of years, as we've seen kind of a decline of the sport in general in the post-COVID realm, we've seen also a decline of events. Now we've got a new ownership group and a new kind of invigoration of events. And last year we had 5 or 6 events, and this year, this season, the calendar is already up to 18 to 20, counting both tier 1s and satellites. The more events that you have means that the more interest and the more of a groundswell you're going to get for players that are interested. And I think that we see that immediately here in Denver. There's 43 players here in this draw. That's a really healthy draw, considering how many of these players are coming from Central and South America to play. And so 100%, what you mentioned, this draw is led by the King, the 15-time champion Kane. But Kane's 43, and Father Time is undefeated. And so a huge storyline for me is, hey, you've got a guy who's 43 that still is essentially unbeatable. But at some point, he's going to start being beatable. And who's going to be the player that steps up there? That's going to be the storyline that I'm watching this season.
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. The other thing I was thinking about as well is we didn't even talk about, and at least I didn't talk about him either, is you're right. I want to focus on Kane's portion of the draw. I'd say for sure in this draw, it's pretty balanced. I'd say 60-40, and I'm saying 60% of the meat's going to be in the top half of the draw. And so you're seeing Kane match up with arguably one of the other best players, one of the most, I'd say, given the best challenge of the next generation of players, famed superstar in Bolivia, Conrado Moscoso. and he's going to see him. I believe it's going to be in the 16s, followed by a potential Manilla in the quarterfinals, depending if he can get through a recovering and looking sharp Alan Natera.
Yeah, 100%. So Kane comes in here as the clear number one. He's amassed a pretty dominant lead on tour right now. And as you mentioned, Moscoso comes in as the number 17 seed, I believe. Well, why is he the number 17 seed? Because he suffered an injury last fall that knocked him out of a couple events, and then he suffered another injury. He had an arm injury, and then he had a knee injury that knocked him out of an event earlier this year. Now he's healthy, he's back, as evidenced by the fact that he just won the World Games in China. But he's lost so many ranking points that he's now down to the 17 range, which is a bummer because, in my opinion, Moscoso is the second best player in the world behind Kane. And so you want that to be a final. You don't want that to be a round of 16 and have one of those two players exit. But this is the way that the points work, and this is the way that things will work out. And so both of those players are going to have a far too early challenge in this event.
Right. And playing into them, Todd, I mean, we can't leave this out. The bottom half of the top draw, more than likely, we're going to see some spades play through here. You're going to see Eduardo Portillo playing against big Bredenbeck. And I think, for me, this becomes the dark horse leading into the semifinal. So Kane's got to go through Moscoso more than likely, right? Let's play it up by the odds. Then he's got to probably play 50-50. I'm going to say 60-40. Adam probably will take Natera. And then you're going to see the winner of Portillo and Bredenbeck with a one sleeper in there. And that's our Gerson that's in there, man. It's going to be interesting to see what Mr. Miranda has up his sleeve. But ultimately, that's why I say there's so much in there. It's going to be such a great challenge for Kane. Dominant, without a doubt, winning record against most of these guys, if not all of them. But these are some challenging times. What a great first tournament for the top half to really see where Kane is playing at the age of 43.
Yeah, 100%. Another name to throw into this top half, if we're talking about, draws to or names to look out for, is one Jhonatan Flores. He's the two-time defending World 18U champ. He slots in this event as the number 20 seed. 20 means he plays into 13, which plays into 4, which is Jake. Jake is coming off Jake got upset early at the World Games, and Jake is at kind of an interesting career inflection point. He's 32, 33 at this point, maybe a little older. Don't quote me on that. But that is just the right age where you start to see pro players really convert, and they are really kind of hit transition from, hey, I'm making the semis and finals as a top player, to, hey, I'm getting beat in the quarters, or, hey, I take a shock loss in the 16s, and then I just traveled to an event to walk away with like a couple $100 paycheck. There's a long history of pro players basically retiring right in that same range that where Jake is right now. And so another storyline to watch this season is, how long is Jake going to continue to tour? If Jake takes a couple of early upset losses to some of these young guns, is he going to, make a reasonable life decision to say, hey, maybe this touring thing is something to put in my rear view and focus on his business or other aspects of his life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that might be his saving grace, because I think a lot of, even at the professional level, you start making these life decisions. We've seen a lot of players do it. Some of them have done really well, like a Sudsy Manchik, Cliff Swain, Rocky Carson. They've done really well for themselves. When Jason Menino was in it, just absolute assets and marketability with these guys. And I think that's what this younger generation has as they develop more. And I think that's what comes with the tour experience. Develop more of who they actually are and who we get to see in their passion. That's where the marketability comes. And I think the saving grace for Jake is he's added this business to his repertoire of what his journey in racquetball has been. But let's take a look at the second half of this draw, Todd. Who are we going with for you? We got this bottom half still competitive, a little more up top, but still a very competitive draw. Who do you have coming out here?
So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to pull a crazy pick coming out of the bottom end of this draw, and I'm going to pick Diego Garcia to make the final. So Andres Acuna is a number 2 seed, and he's a number 2 seed because he's had an amazingly consistent past year or so where he's really done a great job of making, the back ends of these tournaments. But Andre Acuna has never won a tournament. He's somehow made it all the way up to number 2 without getting a tournament win. And what's interesting about the likes of Garcia and Flores and some of these other South Americans is that we don't really know how good these players are because they don't tour regularly, right? It's such a difficult ask for them to fly up. And so usually what we see is we will see the likes of the Bolivians and the Argentinians fly up if there's a couple of IRT events right in a row, and then they will hang around in country for a couple of weeks and then they'll fly back. They're not going to fly all the way up if there's a one-off tournament in Portland and then leave. And so as a result, they just never have the points. However, we've seen Diego Garcia's results recently. He won the Park in 2024 in April by beating Moscoso in the final, and he just made the final in China. So this guy can get wins. He can make things happen. He's got to get through Collins in the opening round. Then he's got to upset Acuna, the number 2 seed, and then he likely is going to have to play in a quarterfinal or a semifinal match the winner of Mar and Alonso, 2 players that I think he matches up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like your assessment too, because that's where the fun part of my picks come into play, is in this bottom half. Obviously, my 1 through 4 pick is going to be Kane. My 5 through 8 is going to actually be Mar, and this is where that fun part of the draw comes from. Really liked how he played at the Golden State Open, which is actually coming up next month. Followed in by Manilla back up top, my 9 through 16. And then guess who my 17 plus is? Diego Garcia. I'm kind of hedging my bet down there with Mar. I feel like that's going to be a fun part, but it's not. It's so much fun because you've got the veterans like a Rodrigo Montoya. That's more than likely going to come out, and he's going to probably play Andre Perea. That being said, he's got to get through who we talked about. Gerson is probably going to match up with Perea, and it looks like, there might be a tough bet there for Montoya if Salvatierra comes through. But beyond that, it should be a nice little walk there to the quarterfinals. And then that bottom, I like it, man. It's a lot of fun. You've got Diego Garcia down there. You got Jordi Alonso, Javier Mar, Robbie Collins, Andres Acuna, right? You've got just this great group of guys that are down there, and it's going to be fun to watch the bottom half of the bottom draw.
Oh, totally agree. A 7-10 matchup between Mar and Alonso is really fascinating. Those guys both play kind of a similar game, meaning they're both kind of bigger guys, but they have power, but they both rely more on accuracy and shot making as opposed to just blasting the ball off the court. So that and of course they're both Mexican, so they have kind of a history of playing each other back home, either whether it's in local tournaments or whether it's in Mexican nationals. The other, and then also projecting the way up. If we get to a quarter on the top, a 3-6 quarter between Perea and Montoya, those guys have played each other 50 times in their careers. They both are in the same they're both relatively the same age. So that means that they've been playing each other in juniors all growing up. And then again, in Mexican nationals, in local events, and now on the pro tour. Those two have play a completely different style of game, as you know. Montoya, power, athleticism. He's going to try to blast the ball off the court, whereas Perea is really kind of a thinker. He's trying to figure out, how little effort he has to expend in order to get an effective serve in. Just as athletic and just as good of a shot maker. And so it's a contrast in styles. If it turns out that we get a Perea Montoya quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so fun too. And I think what's really cool about that duo too, about the Montoya and Perea, is you've got the retrieving ability, great angles, doesn't seem to tire. Andre Perea going against just a fluid, a pure shot maker like Montoya. Drive serves when they're on, have fun playing for second place. Like it's such a great meld of two opposites coming together that play the styles really well. But Todd, as we wrap up this men's portion of the draw, who are your top pick for your fantasy team?
So I'm picking Kane at the top, obviously. My 5 to 8, I'm picking Montoya. I think Montoya makes the semis from that little quarter. I think Montoya's got the edge over Perea if it comes to 3-6. My 9 to 16, I'm picking Garcia because he's the 15 seed, and I think he can beat Acuna, and then I think he can advance to the semis. And then my wild card pick is going to be my 4th semifinal pick. I think Jhonatan Flores can upset Jake because he beat Jake in Chicago of March last year pretty handily, and he can beat and he can get past Portillo at the number 5 spot. So my semis are my 4 picks: Kane, Flores, Montoya, Garcia.
You know what, Todd? That's not as boring as I thought. I thought you were going to be the statistical man. You know you to be. Thought for sure it was going to be boom, 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 especially with Moscoso there in the 17, just to take him in there. But that's actually fun. I like your pick. They get very, how do we call it? It's very savvy there at the bottom. Like, it gets fun. It's interesting. For me, my pick is going to go Kane through the 1 through 4. As I said, Mar for the 5 through 8. It's going to be Manilla for that 16 spot. And then Diego Garcia will be my wild card. So I feel like my 5 and 8, my wild card, are probably a little more of the gamble where you played your 3 and 4. I like that.
You know, when I'm predicting these matches in my pre-tournament write-ups, I'm always looking for the upset. I am a sucker for I'm a sucker for Miranda and for Garcia and for Flores, and I've always been a sucker for Mar. And even in the previous era of racquetball, I was a sucker for Landa, who was this guy that no one knew who he was, and he would just then show up and make the semis of the U.S. Open out of the blue, and then wouldn't play the Pro Tour for a year. You know. So yeah, I love the underdog. I love the upsets. I used to have Alvaro Beltran come to me and be like, you never pick me to win. You always think I'm going to get upset. I'm like, Alvy, I just love it when we get the upsets. I love it when the kids get some success, and so I always choose them to beat you. And he's like, all right, that's.
Well, Todd, it's going to be fun to watch. I think I'm going to be pulling out here in front, but who knows? It's the first tournament, and people are coming back from injury. People have been well. People are aging, and I would say like fine wine. And then we've also seen some familiar faces that are not so familiar with the draw, not playing singles. In Belgium, like you said, we knew Londa retired, and also Rocky Carson. So it really opens this whole thing up. But what is cool, as we make a tangent here over to mixed doubles, is to see someone, a veteran, one of the greatest well-rounded players of all time in the outdoor-indoor singles doubles. We see Rocky Carson back in the mix with Michelle Key. We see amazing matchups like Longoria and Moscoso. I mean, it is absolutely deadly in the 16s. Longoria Moscoso will take that number 1 seed as Natera Munoz, the wife and husband combo, top touring players on their respective tours. Great individually by themselves as well, taking the 2nd seed. And then you've got another one to watch there, Monsi Mejia and Javier Mar coming together. And the 4th seed is Carrera and Portilla, another couple coming up. Great singularly, great in doubles. What's your take on this mixed doubles matchup?
You know, so we don't get a ton of mixed pro doubles. In fact, if we want to take a little history lesson of this event in particular, Jim Heiser, the tournament director, conceived this event initially as a doubles-only pro event, and that was really kind of unique. So in 2018, doubles only at the time, and it was really like the first time ever that we'd had a mixed pro draw. That tournament came down to, as it turned out, Daniel and his then wife Michelle De La Rosa won that event, and they beat in the finals kind of a surprise team of Mario Mercado and Adriana Riveros, kind of the all-Colombian team at the time. Fast forward 3 years, we had to skip a year for COVID, but Heiser has been kind of on this every 2-year cadence for this event. And so we got World Singles and Doubles in 2021, which was won by Montoya and Salas. That was notable because in between that same time frame, we started to get the IRF offering mixed doubles in their international events. And Montoya and Salas were the winners of the first 2 ever international mixed doubles events that were competed as well. So that was like the standard bearer. They eventually split up, and Montoya eventually went by the wayside. And at the 23 World Singles and Doubles, we saw a pretty powerful team in Conrado Moscoso and Paola Longoria take that over the husband-wife team of Natera and Munoz, which is where you get the top seeds that you get today. But as you said, when you look at this draw, you're seeing the reigning U.S. national champions or former U.S. national champions in the Manillas. You're seeing the Argentinian national mixed team in Miranda Vargas. You're seeing Mar and Mejia, who have an international title. Salas and Montoya are back, and they're the 7 seed. I mean, these guys, that team has won a number of international mixed titles, and they're the number 7 seed. So this draw is packed, and making a prediction is just crazy.
It is. I will say this though, we've got incredible because yes, you're right. We have the Manillas, and I think it's who do we have Rivero and Gastelum. We didn't talk enough about Gastelum in the singles, but here he is again in the mix, another rising star coming out of the South Americas, and I imagine the Manillas will probably come through with that. So then you're going to have a Perea and Mendez against Manilla, deadly in the 16s. And then up top above them in the same top of the draw, you're going to have Martel and Laime, which that is my dark horse. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. Jaime, a great player on the tour. He's qualified to quarterfinals. Not sure if he's made a semi on the tour, but either way, he's a great player in his own right. However, in doubles, he's one of my favorite players to watch. Just so compatible with everybody. He'll team up with Laime, who, when she's on, just go ahead and get the mop. The best you can do is mop the floor. That's all you need to be doing. And then you look at the bottom half, and we didn't talk about it either, but you did. You brought it up. I like the idea of Solis and Montoya. That right there is going to be tough, but they come into a Jordi Alonso and a Christina Amaya right away. So, and the winner of that will probably play either Rocky Carson, Michelle Key, or Natera and Munoz. So it's just, there's no safe spot in this draw.
No, and making predictions in these mixed draws is challenging. Usually if I'm doing prognosticating and I'm trying to guess, the first place that I look is I look at the which of the 2 female partners in mixed are the strongest, and I use that to kind of guide my prediction. However, that's not always a useful way to do analysis, because some players, as we know, some female players, as we know, are much better at doubles than others. You mentioned it yourself. Laime may not get a ton of results in singles on tour necessarily, but she is an amazing doubles player. Natalia Mendez is a huge doubles player. She gets a ton of results. And so I don't want to go up against these double specialists. And Michelle Key probably is the most accomplished doubles player in this draw when you combine both her international, her indoor, and her outdoor accomplishments.
Absolutely. And some notable mentions here. And this is one that pulls on my personal heartstrings. It's so good to see Ronda Rasic back in a professional event. One of my favorite female players ever, any sport. Love this woman. She's teaming up with national team member Thomas Carter. And he's another one that's just, he's really compatible with who he plays, a left-handed guy, so it throws a little screw into the system. And then one thing to really watch here, because we don't know, and I remember when Amy Beth came on the scene, everyone's like, what? Who is this? I mean, this was way back in the day. Who is this left-handed player from the Jersey Shore? And then she goes up to rattle numerous national doubles titles. So why I say all that to say this, Jake Bredenbeck is going to be pairing up with, I think the last name is Pairings. I love when these people that we don't know about come up, and it just, here's all I need to say. Jake Bredenbeck shows me. That's all I need on my resume right there. So interesting to see what happens there. Good to see Rhonda in there. Good to see Jake coming out with someone we're not too familiar with. So it's a loaded draw.
100%. Yeah, the mix is going to be great.
And just to wrap it up here, Todd, I'm going to give you my final 4. Previously, I mentioned someone who is actually in the top 15, but here's my 4th bet here. I've got Kane in the 1 through 4. I've got Javier Mar in the 5 through 8. I've got Adam Manilla in my 9 through 16 spot as my dark horse extraordinaire, and I think it's just his time to shine. I'm going with Sam Bredenbeck in my 17 plus spot.
I like that. All right, here's my team. I'm going with Kane in the number 1 through 4 spot. I think Kane's going to win this event. In my 5 to 8, I've got Rodrigo Montoya, the flying Mexican. If it's a Kane Montoya final, we're going to have fireworks. In my 9 to 16, I'm going with the number 15 seed Diego Garcia, who I think can make some noise in this draw. And my wild card, my dark horse outside the top 16, is 2-time defending 18U junior world champion Bolivian Jhonatan Flores, who may just make a run into the semis. Now, for those of you at home who want to play along and see if you can create your fantasy team to beat Brian and myself, here's what you do. You go to irttour.com/club. You log in, you click on the fast break link at the top right, and from there you can enter your team. You can see your results, your points as the tournament goes on, and you can see your real-time leaderboard to see how you're winning or competing against the rest of us that are in fantasy. We're going to declare a winner for each event, and then we're going to declare a season-long winner. And the winners are going to have, at the least, they're going to have bragging rights over Brian and myself if you can beat us. And at the most, you're going to have fabulous prizes that might include some cool signed memorabilia or other cool stuff that Adam and he is going to dream up.
Awesome. And guys, we invite you to join us after. So this is the pre, and there's going to be an after every week, every episode, post and pre-event for the IRT. And we're going to recapping everything from the people who came out and shined to those who just busted and were down and out on the first day. And I just want to let you guys know you're welcome to join us. Like Todd said, I dare you to beat us. And just remember, guys, hashtag IRT Fantasy.
Thanks, Brian. Good to talk to you. Good to chat.
You too, Todd.
By the way, you're going down. I'm finishing ahead of you in fantasy.
Nile is no longer a river in Egypt, is it, Todd?